Thanks everyone for coming this afternoon. I really appreciate it. My name is Stephen Schwankert. I guess I knew that there had been Chinese people aboard Titanic, but there just wasn't really that much information about them. But then when I started to look at it a little bit more, I thought, well, wait, out of these 8, 6 of them survived. One of them is plucked from the water. He's maybe the last person rescued from Titanic. The last person rescued from Titanic is Chinese. Are you kidding me? That was it. That was the end of the story. And I thought, well, they didn't sail off into the Bermuda Triangle. They didn't just disappear. They probably had lives, had families. Absolute dead silence. And I thought, well, that's not possible. They're out there. We've got to go find them. Titanic is the alpha and the omega of shipwrecks. It is the shipwreck that everyone thinks of, whether we like it or not. More than 700 people survived, and those stories are very well documented for almost every single one of those survivors. But the Chinese are almost uniquely unknown. So to be on the precipice of demonstrating to over 1 billion people that their countrymen were on board and played a role in this story that they had no idea about. Yeah, I mean, how could you turn that down? They were there and they lived it. They deserve to tell their story as much as any other survivors do. I was in China in 1998 when Titanic was released, and I mean, it was just an absolute phenomenon.
I think it was a surprise because our great success with the film was in China. I mean, we did well everywhere, but we did so disproportionately well in China that it was a huge eye-opener for Hollywood. When I made that film, it was a bit the untold story of Titanic, in the sense that the story of the glittering high society that went down with the ship, that plunged the world into uncertainty, that was the story that was told. That was the story that was enshrined. But the story of the third class, the immigrants, in a sense, their emotions were bigger, their dreams were bigger. And now to find out that 6 out of 8 of the Chinese survived, there might be some sense of, well, this is our story now too.
基本上在我成长的过程中，从来没有听说过泰坦尼克号上面有中国乘客。当时感觉就是在一个所有人都知道的世界里面，忽然有一个其他人不知道，但是我知道的秘密。
They would have been the most foreign of the foreign passengers. Where they are mentioned, it's almost always a portrayal that's negative, but there just wasn't that much information out there to begin with.
最开始的时候，我们能找到关于他们的信息是只有2张名单，一张是泰坦尼克号上面登记的外国人登船的名单，然后另外一张是卡帕西亚，就是救援船上面记录的这些幸存者的名单。我们知道他们之前的职业是水手，但是在泰坦尼克号上面，他们只作为3等舱乘客登船的。
We had 8 names for them: Ali Lam, Fang Long, Len Lam, Cheng Fu, Chang Chip, Ling He, Li Bing, and Li Ling. The names were transcribed into English, so at least we had some idea of what they would sound like. But each one of those pronunciations could represent dozens of Chinese characters. one of them in particular sounded implausible. For more than 100 years, the first name on that passenger list was understood to be Ali Lam, A-L-I, like Muhammad Ali, okay, Ali Lam.
很多外国人甚至中国人不太清楚的一个习俗，就是中国南方，特别是广东地区，他们会习惯性的叫一个人啊什么什么，后面跟的是一个姓氏，然后写下来他会写成一个亚，所以我们发现它其实不是一个 ALI 的写法，它其实应该是 AH 的一个连笔。
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 那我可以了解，对说英语的人的耳朵来说是没有人叫啊，我们没有这个习惯。
Really, when you're working with as little information as we had from the Titanic documents, the name and a sort of rough age is basically what you're going on. Chongfu is not that uncommon as a name. There was an abundance of documents. My favourite is Chongfu, who in 1925 married a white woman, Georgina Bellman. I love this one. This woman ended up going to like 5 or 6 different husbands. Her marriage with Chongfu lasted 9 years. We had opium smuggling, we had murder, we had suicide. This was so exciting. I mean, to be able to find an immediate family link. Do they have kids? Are they living ancestors? Is there someone who can confirm, oh yeah, my grandfather, my father was this guy from the Titanic? And we spent weeks finding like dozens and dozens of documents on this, and eventually we found something that gave us his age, and he was too young. We find a news article that makes this Chongfu about 10 years older than the one that we were looking at. Ultimately, it was a bit too much of a stretch to make him our guy.
There's just a million Chongfus. There's Chongfus that are born in the same year, working on British ships. There's dozens. Some of them went to America. There's a few that immigrated to Hawaii. We basically lose them. They're everywhere. There was just too many of them. I couldn't find them.
在调查一开始，我们发现很多人在网上讨论泰坦尼克号，然后我们在一个论坛上面找到，大家有在讨论有没有人知道在泰坦尼克号上面有中国人。其中有一个人好像知道很多关于方朗这个人的讯息，就引起了我们的好奇，他怎么会知道？
找到这个人很关键，他可能掌握了至关重要的线索，可以告诉我们更多信息。问题就在于他在论坛上的这个账号已经注销很久，不再使用了，所以我们只能试着用一个广撒网的办法，在他注销的这个用户名后面加上各种邮箱的后缀名，全部都发了一篇邮件。2个星期后，我们竟然真的收到了回复。
Many people have come forward over the years and said that they're related to someone on board Titanic, and it turns out not to be true. It just seems to be a story that people want to be connected to. So for a family then to, more than 100 years after the sinking, say that they're related to a particular person on board Titanic, that's always going to make us skeptical. And when you add to that a man that we knew as Fang Lang is called Feng Wing Sun, that's going to create a lot of doubt.
Steve? Nice to meet you. How are you? Nice to meet you. This is my son Steve. Nice to meet you. I think he was in his 50s back then.
Okay.
I think it was like 58 or 59, somewhere around there.
So about what year was this?
Probably like 1955
In Hong Kong.
in Hong Kong. And later on, I was born here in the States. I asked my mother, did she know? She said she never heard about it. She never heard about my father being on his boat and sinking or anything. And this is the woman that told me the story. And she never mentioned Titanic. She just mentioned he was pulled out of the ocean. The first part I remember her telling me was somehow he strapped himself to a corpse, to a floating corpse, to a belt, and then somehow he made it to a door. And at that time, I didn't know anything about Titanic. I was just 8 years old, so I thought it was in China. Back 2003, 4. I took my cousin and his new wife, Bride. I took them to this like a giant museum. It's called the House on Rock. And then there was this display of Titanic items that my cousin Henry just mentions. Her father was on that. And it never dawned on me, and I never thought of it, and I just didn't really consider it was real. We come home. My son Steven there, he runs upstairs, hop on the computer, and he starts doing this passenger list. And he happens to find the name Fang Lang and how this lady that was on the ship was in lifeboat number 14, described how he saved this Chinese man off his door. But then Fang Lang didn't seem right because his name wasn't Fang Lang. I thought, well, could be phones on it. They just sort of wrote the name wrong. But then again, the story, when I heard as an 8-year-old to what I read on the computer, it starts to make sense. It starts to make sense. This is the photo I think about the time when he just on the Titanic.
Yeah.
And did you find the name?
Yeah.
Phones on it.
Yeah. Oh, wait, the name is different on this. Here it says Following Sun, and here is Following Sun. That's extraordinary. Wow. 1934. So two things with a different name for him. And neither of them follow. Have you ever seen the deleted scene from Titanic with the Chinese guy on the door?
Well, that's the we should show you that.
Do we have a laptop?
I have it with
Well,
me.
there's a deleted scene in the movie.
So
It's the scene where Harold Lowe takes Lifeboat 14 back to rescue survivors. And if everything plays out, the deleted scene, the character he's playing, though they didn't know this at the time.
It was taking my father.
I see him! Whoa! 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 Put your backs into it! I see him! Put your backs into it! Hold water! Bring him in! Help him out! Bring him in quickly! Cover him with those blankets! Keep him warm! There's some blankets up here. Cover him up.
that was really something.
It's more convincing when you speak to him, man.
Absolutely. He clearly believes it.
There's a sort of sadness to the whole thing.
Well, I mean, think about it. Imagine if your father had been, an active participant and survivor in, one of the most fabled historical events of the 20th century, and he never mentioned it to you. You'd be a little disappointed, wouldn't you? Don't you wish that your father had told you that directly? I think so. So I can understand that.
Iceberg! Clear ahead! Good!
At 11:40 p.m. on the night of April 14, 1912, Titanic strikes the iceberg.
You see what happened? No, I missed it.
单身的三等舱男性乘客的舱位是在位于船头的位置，正好当船头撞上冰山的时候，他们可能是第一批感知到有一些震感。
Chinese passengers would have known immediately that this is out of the ordinary. Even if they were asleep, they would have been awakened and they would have realized that something was very wrong. But just after midnight, they're starting to get water underneath their feet. They have no choice. Freezing water is coming in, they've got to grab their things, and they've got to get out of there. We knew where the Chinese male passengers would have been berthed. But even looking at plans and photos and drawings, it didn't really give us a great sense of how they would have found their way out. Then we discovered that there were these guys that were developing a game called Titanic Honor and Glory, which is a real-time syncing of Titanic. And as part of that, they had created a CGI model of the interior of Titanic that's hyper-accurate. You can move through it in real time. And I thought, wow, who are these guys and why are they doing this?
Steven. Hi, Steven.
So how long have you guys been working on this now?
This is the culmination of about 5 years worth of work.
Wow.
We're building the entire ship. Every corridor, every cabin, every pantry. Everything you see here is what the Titanic was. This is not an artistic interpretation. This is the Titanic, right down to the color shading, the exact layout, and even the mechanical details on the switches.
When we first started looking at possible escape routes, the most obvious one is sort of the traditional third class, especially male passenger route. They would have come out of their room on effigy deck, come up a couple of decks, and they would have connected with what's called Scotland Road, which is a passageway for crew and for third class passengers that runs all the way along the ship.
So you're going to move aft along this corridor, which is Scotland Road, the main access corridor for both third class and the crew. The crew is actually directing passengers to go up to the common room, the third class common room, and they were being told to wait there until further directions were given.
These rooms would have been basically free of water until the very end. And there are, of course, testimony that there were passengers in these rooms until the last minutes of the sinking. And the stewards are just trying to keep ground control at this point. They have their orders to just keep them calm, hold them back, but then they don't want to have a panic, but that's what eventually ensues.
Then the more we thought about it, it seems like, well, these guys were professional mariners. Maybe there was another way.
So there's 2 second-class staircases. There's a forward and an aft second-class staircase. And each one of them is accessible through these emergency doors, which are labeled. You see the emergency doors right here at the end of Scotland Road, which is where the third class actually boards the ship. So they know this area from their first day.
And they would have seen this stairwell open in front of us.
It's an unfamiliar place, but you don't care at this point. You want to get out of here. You take it all the way up.
They come up close to the aft lifeboats, yeah?
Yes, right next to 13.
For 6 out of 8 of the Chinese to survive, when you have all 33 Bulgarians dying, all 49 Austro-Hungarians dying, you have most surviving for the Chinese. There's no doubt in my mind that this is a group that took the initiative themselves and took their situations in their own hands and went their own path here.
当这些中国人逃到甲板上的时候，在这个时间点，正好泰坦尼克号的船员要放下位于右舷的救生艇，然后当时就有船员问说，这些救生艇上还有一些空位，然后有没有人要上的？其中一个人就正好就上了一个救生艇。
Between 1:40 and 2 a.m., the last lifeboats that are available are collapsible boats. Now, by this point, Titanic is sinking by the bow, but the collapsibles are closest to the waterline. Everyone else is trying to take some kind of refuge up on the stern. Our Chinese passengers go along the starboard side, down towards the bow, and 4 of them make their way into collapsible lifeboat C.
还剩下的3个中国乘客，我们判断在泰坦尼克号逐渐沉没的过程当中，他们掉进了海里。从幸存者名单上，我们得知3个人中，兰兰和黎令没能活下来。还有一个人被后来折返的14号救生艇救了上来，他就是我们的幸存者风浪。
I've always admired the guy, on the door or on the piece of wood, because he, that takes real grit to figure that out. and to stick with it and to wait. And only one boat went back, Harold Lowe's boat. And that became the inspiration for the big finale of the Rose and Jack story, where he's died and she's on the raft alone.
We just cannot, for safety and ethical reasons, go down to Titanic temperatures. Obviously, zero would not be fun. So the plan is that we'll give you an experience of a 12-degree, 40-minute immersion, because that's probably the shortest period of time to see those three stages of initial responses, some kind of physical deterioration because of cooling of the superficial nerves and muscles, particularly in the arms, and then starting to see a fall in deep body temperature.
The men would not have been wearing their work clothes while on Titanic. They were just passengers. They would have worn what was comfortable, what was easy for them to wear. So very likely they would have chosen some form of Chinese dress. I'm the volunteer today. That's why I'm wearing this. I'm holding the lead to a thermometer that is deep inside me at the moment.
And we're going to measure your deep body temperature from that. So we'll be able to see how quickly you start to cool.
Here are 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go.
Cold water as an experience is much different than cold air. First of all, cold air has to be much colder than cold water before you really start to feel the chill. You start to shiver much earlier.
But now we're into the phase where that cold front now that started going through your body as you went into the water is now reaching the core of your body and you're starting to cool. We'll take off the ECG, we'll take the chair out, and you can just do some breaststroke.
There's just a feeling that you can't get warm, you can't stop it. It's a very unpleasant feeling. In fact, it's one of the reasons a lot of people only dive in tropical waters, because they just don't ever want to face the cold in any way.
Okay, stop seating. Should we stop that? Stand up, brother.
Probably the conclusion was that anything you were going to get onto and lash yourself to, you've got to be on there within 15, 20 minutes.
I've been in water where I was shaking uncontrollably, which is the first stage of hypothermia. That water wasn't anywhere near as cold as the water was on that night around Titanic. For them, it must have just been unbearable from the first moments until whenever the end came.
Okay, that's 18 seconds. It's pretty impressive / lucky that everything that was done on that night by the gentleman in the water was the right thing to do.
For the 3 men that ended up in the water, they had to think when they went in that their time was up. They can't see, it's pitch black. people are screaming. Some of the survivors said they could, for the rest of their lives, they couldn't go to public events like baseball games or any gathering like that. They said the noise of the crowd just reminded them of the screams of the dying. Just absolutely horrific. The cold would have been, it certainly would have felt all-consuming from the moment that they first went in. And, they must have thought at that point that this is it, and the end will come any time now. And it did.
She doesn't understand why there's the two different names.
Did you ever hear the name? Feng Sun or Feng Lang?
She always known to be Feng Wen Sun.
And he never said another name?
No.
Always Feng Wen Sun. Always Feng Wen Sun.
佢從來都冇講過太經嘅，我唔知。我個仔話佢喺隻船嗰度，你黐線嘅你傻㗎嘛？乜我都唔知啊！所以佢好秘密嘅嘢咯。
When he sponsored his brother and his wife and I think there was like 5 kids, and they just showed up at the door one day, and then my mom was a little upset because it was a total surprise. Never knew anything about it. I think that brought a lot of tension to the marriage. I was 5 years old when my parents separated. I think I was about 6 when the divorce was actually finalized.
Okay. And then it happened again, yeah?
Another sponsor? Yes. It was the Chu family.
I was born in Hong Kong, and at the end of my 3rd year, my parents decided that the city was the place to raise a child. So they had secured rights to move on to a piece of farmland in the new territory. Following the son of my dad, over the past 4 years, getting a sponsorship, had corresponded, and we were told to expect to be given notification within a 45-day window to move. It was actually September 13th, 1971. We flew into Seattle for customs. I remember the gentleman who checked us in, after transcribing our names into English, handed me a silver dollar. I still have that silver dollar. We were in Seattle for maybe about 3 hours, and then we flew into Chicago. And there receiving us was Feng Wen San. He was a bit older than I had anticipated, in an overcoat, a suit underneath, which was rather formal for the day. And we actually had a reception banquet that night. We were at those tables with 10 seats, traditional Chinese banquets. Feng Wen San was maybe 5 seats away. I went over to speak to him. He relayed to me. He said the ship that I was on crashed into an ice mountain. It's first evening. No, I said it was a huge ship. Whole battery. A very big ship. And he saved himself by grabbing onto debris.
What percent sure are you that he told you those details of the story?
Of that, I'm 100% sure.
事故出现以后，很多故事都已经被写好了。但是这个泰坦尼克的整个叙事就奇特就在于，他会把这样一个事情描绘成一个种族方面的一种叙事。就是1912年，我们知道是这个种族主义话语是非常的这个盛行的时候，就是说这个叙事它有各方面的动机，然后当他要将这个安格鲁萨克森种族要提高的时候，他一定要寻找到就是他的他者。他在他者上面要建立这样一个自己的一种形象，那么当时最好成为这个他者的，恰恰是中国人。
Collapsible Sea was an obvious place for us to start looking at the origins of these stories and really trying to break down how much can we sort of say with any degree of certainty really happened, what was the true version of events.
We took what was believed to be the correct list of passengers on board Collapsible Sea, and we went through that list to verify what did they say, if anything, about seeing the Chinese men.
So Carter's
obviously first class.
We're really lucky that Collapsible Sea also happens to be the boat that J. Bruce Ismay, the owner of Titanic, leaves Titanic on. No one was grilled harder at the inquiries than Ismay. And he clearly identifies that there were 4, to use his words, Chinamen or Filipinos in his boat. So he gives very clear testimony about their presence, that they hid beneath the seats. On the port side, it was women and children only. But on the starboard side, there was an enforced women and children first policy. In other words, if there were not enough women and children to fill the boat, they would then allow some male passengers on board. He claims he looks around, nobody's waiting to get in the boat. That's the point. Nobody's waiting to get in the boat. So if there are no women and children around waiting to get in the boat, when he gets in last, that means that our guys getting in, there was no reason for them not to get in. Even Ismay himself swore to his dying day that he did everything he could to load women and children onto the boat, and there really is no evidence to the contrary of this. There were none nearby that could have come and gotten into this boat. The reality is the Collapsible Sea is not at capacity when it is finally launched. No one's seats are being taken. 5, 6, 7, so maybe the oar. They stowed themselves away in one of the vessel's lifeboats before they left England. When they heard the shouts of those on board that women were to be saved first, they covered themselves in their shawls. Really?
Oh my God! The lifeboat was cut loose after reaching the surface, and to young Frank, it was a great adventure. He remembers particularly looking toward the rear of the boat and seeing 4 Chinese crouching there. Their long black coats and round caps probably passed them as women in the confusion, he believes.
Maybe we want to print that out. We still have this claim of the guys were asked to get out. So were they asked to get out at gunpoint and didn't get out?
Okay, so that's what I learned.
Was a gun fired in the air? They said, get out of the boat, bang!
Yeah.
So Officer Rose says, I went to the boat, women and children were being passed in. I assisted 6, 3 women and 3 children. The order was then given to lower the boat. So here he makes no mention of any struggle, any get those guys out, any gun, no mention of any of that. Not everyone feels that they had an equal chance at a lifeboat because of who they were, because they looked Italian or Armenian or like they didn't originate from Britain or from the United States.
One is at point 4. I want to know what that measurement is in millimeters. That's awesome. All right, so let's get the next one.
So there were 8 Chinese passengers on Titanic. 6 of them survived. 4 of them survived in collapsible lifeboat C. Now, the thing that has bothered us is that people have always said that the 4 Chinese men were stowaways who kind of, hid under the seats. And we felt that there was no way we were going to ever prove it one way or the other unless we got a model and showed once and for all what was physically possible and what was not physically possible.
Foot down there. There you go. Don't lean on that. There you go.
Good. Okay. I mean, imagine you had to stay in this position for 4 hours.
Don't lean on these. They're not strong. He was one of the guys working on the boat. Just watch your head there.
So it's physically possible, but how could you not notice that there are 4 people lying there?
Who else worked on the boat? You worked on the boat? Yeah, go on. All right. There you go there. That's it.
8, 9, 10, 11. Okay. 16, 17. Not to be that surprised.
2, 3, 4, 5 more people.
So like this man, we're going to get him right at the last moment.
From the quartermaster's point, I can't see them.
That's it, you can't see them. I can't see anybody that's present. I can barely see the people in the bow. Survivors, put your hands up. Just put a hand up. I can barely see the survivors from here if I know what I'm looking for. And imagine that it's not a sunny afternoon, it's night. Once they get away from Titanic, there's no light. The claim was that at daylight, 3 or 4 hours after Titanic sank, the Chinese passengers emerged or came up or were discovered on board. For those of you that are sitting down, can you imagine having someone under your feet for 4 hours? Would you not notice that? I mean, you'd feel that for sure.
Guys, I want to say a round of applause to the builders for sticking with me for a year. Thank you very much, guys. That was amazing.
Finally, we know that it's not people trying, nobody's trying to deceive anyone. It's just their line of sight, their literal line of sight. It's their actual perception. You don't get a lot of chances to correct bits of the Titanic record, and I think we have finally done that. And we have finally given these men a chance to show that they weren't cowards. They were just guys who wanted to survive. That doesn't make you a coward, okay? Ismay wants to survive, Carter wants to survive, the others on board wanted to survive. And they had that right, and they had their opportunity, and they got in, and that's it. Once Titanic sank and everyone was evacuated to lifeboats, those lifeboats spent about 3 or 4 hours drifting around. And then closer to daybreak, SS Carpathia, which had heard Titanic's distress call, sped to the accident site. It finally arrives, sees all the little boats, and it starts to pick up the passengers. So all the survivors are rescued, they get on board, and then Carpathia turns again and heads for New York.
New York, and the reports in the New York Times say there are 2,000 people waiting, and it's complete silence as the ship enters. Behind the Carpathia is a tugboat full of photographers trying to catch the first glimpses of the survivors, and then the first cries of recognition and just sobbing. And they say that the wailing just sort of crescendoed.
So once the passengers came off of Carpathia, where they were going to go afterwards?
Well, I think for many, the first-class passengers, they had loved ones or friends coming to pick them up. And those who just didn't have a place to stay, many went to Jane Hotel. And those who were sick or in need of medical care, many of them went to St. Vincent Hospital nearby. The only ones left on board were those who were too ill to be taken off, and our 6 Chinese survivors. You know, I wonder if they could look out their windows and see the scene or hear people's cries, you know. But they stayed on ship for another night, and then they were taken to Pier 9, where they boarded the Annetta and then departed the next day for Cuba.
They are unique among the other passengers in the sense that they are the least welcome. In 1912, the prevailing attitude towards Chinese in the United States was negative. You know, they were portrayed as taking American jobs and foreigners that we didn't want in the country. You know, the Yellow Peril. The Chinese Exclusion Act is in effect, and that basically excludes almost all Chinese from entering the United States legally. That means that even if these guys suddenly changed their mind and said, I've just been through a sea disaster, no way am I getting on that ship. I don't want anything more to do with the ocean. They had no choice. They were going to have to leave.
美国这个排华法案，1882年的时候，把中国华工排除了，是非常不讲道理的。就是说，他们认为中国劳工太多，他要禁止华工来，这样的话就没有这个劳工的竞争。普安城条约是1868年通过的，允许两国的人民自由来往到其他国家去定居，所以中国人到美国来是合法移民。美国政府1880年把这个普安城条约一部分强迫中国政府把它废除了。是谁不讲信用，谁不讲法律？他是美国政府。
And then all of a sudden, Chinese couldn't come to America. They weren't part of America. Think about the tens of thousands of Chinese laborers who built the damn railroad. The railroad was the spine on which the country's economy was built. But the principle that they would be promptly expelled after the experience that they just went through, just because America was closing its doors, not to all immigrants, just to the Chinese after having exploited them as cheap labor for so long. It's just, you know, just add it to the list of, you know, of American atrocities in my mind.
They arrive in New York. About 24 hours later, they board a cargo ship and go off to work. But then after that, they're never mentioned again. Where did they go? How is it possible that, you know, that they just suddenly disappeared? So the 6 survivors leave New York on SS Annetta almost immediately after arriving in Carpathia. And it's actually Annetta that points the way for the Bristol archives, and they had a lot of the shipping records from that time.
Here we go. So this is the box that has the crew list for the SS Annetta. The first one we have here, SS Annetta.